All right, let's talk about converting fractions into decimals. So we've worked a long time with fractions, and so we are moving into decimals, or we have already started moving into decimals. And so we know that in place value, we talk about tenths, which is TENTHS. THS tells us it's a decimal or a part of the whole. And then we've also started talking about hundredths, which is HUNDREDTHS. That THS still tells us it's a decimal or a part of the whole. So when we are talking about converting fractions to decimals, it's important to note that when you read a fraction out loud, it sounds the same as when you read a decimal out loud. So, for example, we would say 35 hundredths for this one. So that tells us we have 35 parts of the whole, which is 100. So we need to think about the parts of our fraction here in order to figure out how we write it as a decimal. First things first, we look to see if there's a whole number. In this case, there's not. So we know that there are 0 wholes. And now we're looking at our decimal part. So we need to think about how many tenths are in our fraction. So looking at 35, we know that there are 3 tenths there because there are 30 fifths. So our 3, I'm saying so a lot. Our 3 here is going to be in the tenths place because that's the number of tenths that we have. Now we need to think about how many hundredths we have. We have 5 of them. So we have 5 hundredths. When we read our number or decimal out loud here, we have 35 hundredths. Another way that you could do this is by looking at a model. So I'm going to go ahead and draw our model of 35 hundredths. So give me just a second. It's going to take me a little bit. Okay, now we have our model that represents our 35 hundredths. And we can see how many tenths we have here. We have 1, 2, 3. We have 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, which is our 3 right here. And we have our 5 hundredths, which is right there. So it's important when you're converting fractions to decimals to just read it out loud, and that will literally tell you the exact way that you write it. So let's talk about going from a decimal to a fraction. It follows the same easy pattern of you just need to read it out loud. Okay, so let's say that we start with 7 tenths. So again, it's important to read it out loud. The thing with going from a decimal to a fraction is that when you read it out loud, it actually tells you what the denominator is going to be. So we see that it says 7 tenths. So that tells us that our denominator is going to be a 10. And how many tens do we have, or tenths? We have 7. Is that easy? So just remember, when you're converting fractions to decimals or decimals to fractions, you need to start by reading it out loud or reading it in your brain and just listening to how you're thinking it or saying it. That will help you convert and to make sure that you're doing it correctly. And that has been Math Corner with Miss Perry. I hope that I have been of some assistance, and I hope that you reach out if you do need more help. See you later.